My name is Patricia, and I want to tell you a story. I grew up in an ordinary family, which could be called an example of a standard family structure: mom, dad, and my younger sister Lily. At first glance, it sounds like the basis for a harmonious and happy life, but not everything was as sunny and rosy as it might seem from the outside. Lily, oh, Lily. The name itself was synonymous with chaos. She was one of those kids who would scream like they were being cut if they didn't get their way. And admittedly, she knew perfectly well how to treat our parents, turning any wish into an order that could not be disobeyed. Her parents tried their best to keep her from having one of her famous tantrums. "Patricia, my dear," my mother would say in a tired, strained voice, "could you give Lily the last cookie? You know how she gets if." And I nodded. Because what else could I do? I was a good girl. I learned an important lesson early on: it's easier to give in than to become part of a conflict. I quickly realized that it was easier to take a back seat than trying to compete with Hurricane Lily. As we grew up, this scenario did not change. Lily demanded that the world revolve around her, and I plunged deeper into books and school assignments, building myself a small inner world where I was calm and happy. I dreamed of the day when I could put it all behind me. That day came when I received a full scholarship to study at college. Packing my bags, I had mixed feelings. Joy for the opportunity to start a new life, and guilt for leaving her parents to deal with Lily alone. But I silenced the guilt, locked it deep inside. I needed to focus on getting my life started. The next morning, when I was loading a few things into my battered old car, my mother hugged me tighter than ever. "I'm so proud of you, Patricia," she whispered. "You'll do fine." Dad slapped me on the shoulder, his eyes were shining, and he said, "Remember, you can always come home if you need to." I nodded, not trusting myself to say a word. And Lily was standing on the porch with a gloomy expression on her face, her arms crossed over her chest. She didn't say a word, but her gaze spoke louder than any words. College has become a breath of fresh air for me. For the first time in my life, I felt free from the need to make concessions, put up with other people's whims, and suppress my desires. I completely immersed myself in my studies, determined to make the most of this opportunity. Meanwhile, at home, life went on as usual. Lily, as expected, did not leave her parents' house. Instead, she married her high school sweetheart Tom right after graduation. And where do you think they decided to live? Of course, the parents. Mom called me sometimes. Her voice sounded tired, but she always tried to seem cheerful. "Lily and Tom are still getting used to family life," she said. "It's good to have grandchildren around." But I could read between the lines. Lily used her parents as free babysitters and housewives. She was in no hurry to look for a job, but very quickly became a mother of 2 children. These calls became a source of anxiety for me, but I tried to focus on my new life. Tom, of course, worked, but as far as I understood, his earnings were not substantial enough to provide for his family. During one of my rare visits home, I accidentally overheard Lily talking to her mother in the kitchen. "Mom, can you look after the kids tonight?" Lily asked, casually sorting through the dishes in the cupboard. "Tom and I want to go out." Mom, wearily wiping her hands with a towel, replied, "Lily, dear, my father and I had plans for this evening." Lily snorted and crossed her arms over her chest. "Oh, come on, you don't have anything important." "We never have days off, we deserve some rest." I peeked cautiously around the corner, watching as Mom's shoulders sagged under the weight of the inevitable concession. "Okay, honey, we'll look after them," she said softly, and there was a note of resignation in her voice that I knew all too well. My stomach was boiling with indignation. How could Lily be so selfish? But what could I say? I have already left this house, leaving my parents alone with her whims. So I bit my tongue and tried to turn my attention to my own life. After graduating from university, I got a job at an international company as a junior manager. It wasn't easy. I worked late, took on additional projects, did my best to prove myself. But the effort paid off. A few years later, I became the head of my department. While Lily continued to demand more and more from her parents, whether it was money or help with children, I saved every penny I earned. I had no glamorous outfits, no noisy parties, no expensive vacations. But gradually my bank account grew, and with it my independence grew. First, I bought an apartment. Nothing special, a small studio, but it was my own. I still remember the day I got the keys. Standing in the empty living room, I couldn't believe that I finally had my own corner in this world. Then came the purchase of a car, again, nothing luxurious, but it was reliable and fully paid for. All this time, I held my head high and worked hard. I didn't have a rich social life, but it suited me. I was building something for myself, something that no one could take away. Dating wasn't one of my priorities. I occasionally agreed to invitations, but nothing serious came of it. That was until I met Jake. From the very beginning, he was different from everyone else. Jake wasn't trying to impress me with expensive restaurants or elaborate compliments. Instead, he challenged me, made me laugh, and most importantly, he shared my rapid pace of life. "You're an unusual woman, Patricia," he said on our third date, looking intently into my eyes. "Most people would burn out with such a busy schedule, but you seem to be just gaining momentum." I shrugged, embarrassed. "I just know what I want, and I'm going for it." He reached across the table and gently touched my palm. "I know what I want, too," he said softly. "And that's you, Patricia." At that moment, I felt the walls that I had so carefully built around my heart begin to crumble. Perhaps there is a place in my life for something more than work and savings. Jake and I dated for several years before he proposed to me. To be honest, I hesitated. Marriage was not part of my plans. I was focused on my career and financial stability. But Jake was able to show me the world beyond my own limitations. He brought a light and warmth into my life that I didn't even know I had. Our wedding day has arrived. Despite my inner excitement, I was happy. The white dress, decorated with fine lace, fit me perfectly. The guests began to gather. The hall was filled with the noise of voices and laughter. And that's when Lily showed up. She waltzed into the room where I was preparing for the ceremony, dressed in a dazzling white dress that looked suspiciously like a wedding dress. Silk fabrics fell in soft waves, and a tiara sparkled on her head. "Lily, what are you doing?" I asked, puzzled, trying to stay calm. She smiled her most dazzling smile. "Isn't it wonderful? I thought this outfit would be perfect for your special day." My heart skipped a beat. All eyes will be on her, not me. It was my day, and she was trying to steal my attention again. "Lily," I began, trying to find the words. "Guests don't usually wear white to a wedding. This tradition." She waved her hand, dismissing my words. "Oh, come on, Patricia. No one will mind. Besides, it suits me, doesn't it?" At that moment, Mom came into the room, noticing the tension in the air. "What's going on here?" I looked at her, hoping for support, but all I saw was fatigue in her eyes. "Mom," I said softly, "Lily chose the wrong dress for today." Mom looked at Lily, who was standing with her head up, and sighed. "Patricia, maybe you shouldn't pay attention to this. It's a festive day after all." My stomach clenched. Even at that moment, Lily was getting her way, and I had to step aside again. But not today. Not now. "I'm sorry, Mom, but this is unacceptable," I said firmly. "Lily, please change your clothes." Lily frowned, her eyes flashing with anger. "You've always been so selfish, Patricia. You can't even let your sister look beautiful at your wedding." I took a deep breath, trying to contain my emotions. It's not a question of beauty, Lily. It's a matter of respect. She snorted and turned on her heel and stormed out of the room. Mom hurried after her, giving me a guilty look. I remained standing in silence, feeling tears coming to my eyes. But then the door opened quietly and Jake came in. "Is everything all right?" "What is it?" he asked softly, coming up to me. I nodded, gathering my strength. "Yes, just a little family drama." He hugged me, pulling me to him. "Remember, today is our day. No one can spoil it if we don't allow it." I smiled at him through my tears. "You're right. Thank you for having me." The ceremony was wonderful. Despite the events of the morning, I felt like the happiest woman in the world. Lily never returned to the wedding, but maybe it was for the best. For the first time in my life, I didn't let her outshine me. And that feeling was liberating. Now I knew that I was no longer that quiet girl who retreated into the shadows. I am Patricia, a woman who builds her own destiny and is not afraid to stand up for herself. "Oh, Patricia," Lily exclaimed, making a graceful turn on the spot to show off her dress in all its glory. "Don't you like it? I wanted to look my best on your big day." Her words, spoken with deliberate innocence, threw me off balance. I stared at her, speechless. She really tried to put me on the back burner at my own wedding. Finally, gathering my courage, I exhaled. "Lily, don't you think this dress is a little not suitable for a bridesmaid?" Lily's face clouded with indignation, and she pouted, as in childhood, when something did not go the way she wanted. She looked back at our cousins, who were helping me pack, and whimsically remarked, "What do you mean?" "I think I look great." "Don't I look great, girls?" The cousins, clearly not wanting to make a scene, exchanged awkward glances and muttered some vague words of agreement. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this was my day, and I wasn't going to let Lily's antics ruin it. "It's okay," I said, looking away at the mirror. "Let's just get this show on the road." The ceremony turned out to be what I dreamed it would be. As I walked down the aisle, Jake's eyes met mine, and at that moment all the stress and family drama disappeared. It was our moment dedicated to our love and future together. However, at the reception, the tension still made itself felt. I heard some of the guests asking Lily if she was the bride. Giggling, she replied, "Oh, no, that's my sister. But doesn't this dress look amazing on me?" I held Jake's hand tightly, but as if reading my mind, he leaned over and whispered, "Everyone knows that you are the star of this show." And he was right. Despite Lily's best efforts to outshine me, the day was still ours. We danced, laughed, and enjoyed the company of friends and family. And at the end of the evening, Jake and I left the party, going on our honeymoon, feeling like the happiest people in the world. After the wedding, life entered a calm, peaceful rhythm. Jake and I moved into the spacious apartment in a beautiful area, and I decided to rent out my old apartment. It was another investment in our common future. I threw myself into my work, full of renewed energy. Jake always supported me, sometimes with a cup of coffee at a late hour when I was dealing with important documents, then with a warm word after unsuccessful deals. I soon became interested in investments, especially securities. This new world was full of risks, but it also promised significant rewards. In 5 years, our savings have grown noticeably, and one day I came up with an idea. "Let's buy a vacation home," I suggested to Jake over dinner. "Somewhere nearby so that we can go there on weekends." My parents would also need it to get some distraction. Jake immediately understood what I meant. The parents struggled to cope with the whims of Lily, her husband Tom, and their 3 children. It was difficult not only physically, but also emotionally. We started looking for a suitable place and soon found the perfect option, a villa on the lake, just an hour's drive from our city. This place was magical. A large barbecue area, a spacious terrace, 3 cozy bedrooms, and a stunning view of the water. I fell in love with the house at first sight. When the deal was done, I could barely contain my excitement. When I dialed my parents' number, I couldn't hide my smile. "Mom, Dad, I have a surprise for you." There was a short pause on the other end of the line, then Mom, with a note of curiosity in her voice, asked, "A surprise? What are you up to, Patricia?" "You just have to see it," I replied, sparkling with anticipation. "This is something that will change everything." When my parents arrived at the villa, I watched their reaction with trepidation. Mom's eyes filled with tears, and she whispered, looking around with awe, "Oh, Patricia, this is too much." Dad didn't say a word. He slowly ran his hand over the smooth kitchen countertop, as if he couldn't believe it was real. His silence spoke louder than any words. "It's not too much," I insisted, smiling. "You deserve this place. Here you can relax and get away from—" I paused, choosing my words, "from everything." Dad looked at me with a slight shadow of guilt in his eyes. "To leave Lily, you mean," he added with a soft sigh. I nodded. "Yes, that's exactly what I meant. Lily and her incessant chaos have long been an unbearable part of their lives." But before I could add anything, a thought struck me. "Listen, there is one request. Can we not tell Lily that I bought this villa? Let her think that you bought it from your savings." Mom looked puzzled. "But why, Patricia?" I sighed heavily, remembering my recent conversation with Lily. She called the day before and asked to borrow money for a new car. When I refused, her angry words echoed in my head. If she finds out about the villa, the reaction will be even worse. "It'll be easier that way," I replied, trying not to show my concern. "Please." After a short pause, they agreed, albeit reluctantly. At that moment, it seemed to me that this was a white lie for the good, but I did not know what kind of storm it would turn into. A few days later, Mom called. Her voice was exhausted, soaked with fatigue. "Lily found out about the villa," she said. My heart skipped a beat. "What did she say?" "She wants us to sell her," Mom continued. "She says it's better to use the money to buy her a sports car or send her on a trip." I felt the blood rush to my face. "And what did you say?" "We said, of course not." "But, Patricia, it was terrible. She screamed, cried, accused us of loving you more than her." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar combination of guilt and disappointment. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I never wanted to cause problems." "It's not your fault, honey," she said softly, but I could hear the weariness permeating her voice to the very core. "And here is an unexpected solution." He and his father decided to move to the villa for good. It was their way of finally distancing themselves from Lily and her family. When I hung up the phone, a strange feeling of relief settled on my shoulders. The parents finally stood up for themselves. But at the same time, anxiety settled in my heart. I knew Lily wouldn't let it go without a fight. A week had passed when Jake and I decided to visit our parents unexpectedly. It was a sunny Saturday, and we were driving in anticipation of a warm family day. But as I drove up to the villa, I noticed something was wrong. Loud music was playing around the neighborhood, and cars were parked in a chaotic manner on the lawn. When we got out of the car, we were greeted by a scene reminiscent of chaos. People were drinking, laughing, children were rushing around, screaming and overturning chairs. Lily stood in the middle of it all, like a prom queen. She was laughing loudly, waving a glass of champagne. When she saw us, her face twisted into a grimace of annoyance. "What are you doing here?" "What is it?" she asked defiantly. I looked around, trying to find my parents. "Where are Mom and Dad?" Lily waved her hand, not even bothering to look in my direction. Mom is walking with the kids, and Dad went to get meat for kebabs. My face turned pale with indignation. Did you send them somewhere while you were having a party here? She shrugged, not at all embarrassed. It's not a party, it's a celebration, she announced, raising her glass. We are baptizing a new family country house. I felt like everything was boiling inside. Lily, it's not. I began, but she interrupted me. Listen, Patricia, she said, narrowing her eyes contemptuously. Why don't you and Jake just leave? Your sour face will only spoil everyone's mood. I froze for a moment, holding back the rage that threatened to burst out. Lily, my voice broke on a sharp exhale, and Jake put his hand on my shoulder, as if warning me not to let my emotions get the better of me. You can't just decide that this place belongs to you. This is not your home. And you know it perfectly well. Her eyes narrowed, and in them flashed the same fire that I remembered from childhood, the fire of stubbornness and audacity. So what? She said with a lazy grin. Mom and Dad live here, right? So it's a family property. I have as much right to enjoy it as they do. My head was spinning. Family property? Is she serious? Jake squeezed my shoulder tighter, but it didn't help. My tolerance has run out. Lily, you have no idea how much effort it took to create this place. I bought this villa for our parents so that they could finally relax. And instead of respecting their peace, you're setting up a bazaar here? Her face flushed with indignation. She put the glass down on the table with force, and some of the champagne splashed out. Did you buy it? She hissed, as if the word was poison. Of course you bought it. You always do well. You are Patricia, the golden girl. And me? I've always been in the background. And now that you have everything, you can't even share. Share it? I laughed bitterly, not believing my ears. Are you even listening to yourself? It's not a matter of division, Lily. It's a matter of respect. She took a step towards me, her face contorted with rage. Oh, of course, respect. Her voice trembled with sarcasm. You've always been like this, correct, hardworking, deserving of everything you have. Don't you think I deserve anything? You need to earn something, Lily, I replied sharply, feeling the words coming out of me like a long, accumulated avalanche. You always took without giving anything in return. You're only thinking about yourself. Her eyes glistened with tears, but they didn't make her any less formidable. You have no idea what I've been through. She shouted, her voice cracking. You just drove away, leaving us all behind, as if we weren't important. And now you're coming here to judge me? This is not a trial, I said, feeling the tremor of anger give way to fatigue. It's true. Lily turned away, trying to hide her tears. The people around began to quiet down, realizing that something serious was happening. Jake took advantage of the moment to step forward cautiously. Lily, he said calmly, this place was created so that your parents could enjoy peace and relaxation. Maybe we could all respect that. She looked at him, then back at me. Her shoulders tightened, as if under the weight of words she couldn't possibly say. Then she raised her glass and, smiling through her tears, said, Okay. Perhaps I'll leave you to enjoy your blessed silence. With that, she left, leaving the glass on the table. The crowd gradually began to disperse, leaving Jake and me standing in the middle of the whole scene. I exhaled wearily, feeling both relieved and anxious. It wasn't easy, Jake said, putting his arm around my shoulders. And it's not over yet, I replied, looking at the empty villa. But at least the parents can get some rest. The sun was setting on the horizon, its warm light flooding the villa and the lake with golden hues. For the first time in a long time, I felt that maybe things could really change. I stood looking at the chaos that reigned around, clenching my hands into fists to keep the emotions rushing out. The lawn in front of the villa had been turned into a makeshift camping site. Plastic chairs stood crookedly, and flies swarmed over the table with food. Against this background, loud music was heard, mixed with the screams of children and the laughter of adults. Jake gently touched my shoulder. "Patricia," he said softly, "we need to do something." I just nodded, heading inside the house. I found my mother in the kitchen, exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. She clutched the rag to her as if it were her last bulwark against the crumbling order. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said, hugging her. She squeezed me so tightly that my ribs tingled. "Oh, Patricia," she whispered, "I was so hoping for a quiet day. Just with the family. Why didn't you tell Lily?" I asked, looking into her tired eyes. Mom sighed and looked away. "She said she wanted to give me a party," she said softly, but there was a note of desperation in her voice. How could I say no to her? My heart was filled with bitterness. I left the kitchen, barely restraining myself, and headed for the backyard. Lily was sitting in the center of the group, beaming like the star of the evening. Her laughter rang out, drowning out the music, and all this chaos seemed to revolve around her. I went up to her, and when she saw me, she stood up with her arms folded. "Oh, hi, Patricia," she said with a grin. "How nice that you decided to join in the fun." "Lily, what are you doing?" I asked, not hiding my irritation. "It's Mom's birthday. She wanted to spend it in a calm atmosphere, not to arrange this circus." "The circus?" Her eyebrows shot up. "Are you calling my holiday a circus? This is not your holiday." My voice is louder than I expected. "You've turned everything upside down again. The parents don't want that. They're tired of your antics." Lily narrowed her eyes, and I saw in her gaze the very poison that she had thrown at me after the story with the guardianship authorities. "Oh, is that so?" she hissed. "I was just trying to do something nice for Mom. And you? You always come here with arrogance, thinking you can judge me. Maybe you've forgotten, Patricia, but I'm part of this family too." "Part of the family?" I laughed in disbelief. "Lily, you've always used them as servants. You're only thinking about yourself. This is no longer a family, but a prison for parents." Her face turned red, and I felt like I had crossed the line. Lily took a step closer, her voice becoming menacing. "You're the same as always, Patricia. The perfect, correct, best daughter. But you're no better than me. You just know how to hide your sins better." Jake, who was watching us from afar, intervened by putting his hand on my shoulder. "That's enough," he said firmly, his voice sounding like an anchor in a stormy sea. "This argument won't change anything." But I couldn't stop. I turned to Lily, feeling years of accumulated anger being released with every word. "If you can't respect your parents, then at least leave them alone. This is their home, Lily. Their life. You have no right to ruin everything I've done for them." She cocked her head as if about to say something, but then changed her mind. Instead, she turned around and left, slamming the door like a teenager. The music stopped after a few minutes, and the guests began to disperse, leaving behind only garbage and a feeling of emptiness. When it was over, I helped my mom clean up the remnants of the holiday. We were sitting on the terrace, looking at the calm surface of the lake, and I felt the weight of the last few weeks gradually go away. "Thank you, Patricia," Mom said, taking my hand. "Thank you for always protecting us, even if it's difficult." I squeezed her hand, unable to say anything in response. Jake sat down next to me, putting his arm around my shoulders, and at that moment I realized that we hadn't reached the end of the road yet, but maybe this day would be the beginning of something new. I was standing in front of Lily, her shrill voice still ringing in my ears, and indignation was boiling inside me. Her face expressed a mixture of shock, anger, and something else, probably dislike, which she did not even try to hide. "Do you really think you can control everything, Patricia?" she said sarcastically, crossing her arms over her chest. "I bought a villa for my parents." "How sweet. But you have no idea what this place means to us." "For us?" I asked, feeling the hot wave of anger rising again. "You turned a house that was supposed to be a quiet haven for Mom and Dad into a rented party room. This is their home, Lily, not your personal playground." Lily grinned, her lips stretched into a smile that seemed almost artificial. "Well, now I know that you bought it." She took a step towards me, her eyes boring into mine. "And you think that gives you the right to dictate what is allowed and what is not allowed here?" "Yes," I said, not looking away. "Because, unlike you, I respect our parents." Lily froze for a moment, her face contorted as if she was about to explode, but instead she laughed, loudly, and completely insincere. "Oh, Patricia," she said with deliberate lightness. "Little Miss Perfect. You've always been like this. All you do is prove how right and good you are, and the rest are pathetic and unworthy. But you know what?" She took a sharp step forward, her face only inches from mine. "You've achieved nothing except destroying your family." "Ruined the family?" I asked, no longer hiding my anger. "It wasn't me who used our parents for years, forcing them to babysit your children and solve your problems. I wasn't the one who threw parties when they just wanted peace." Lily threw up her hands as if in surrender and laughed again. "You know, Patricia, you've always been good at making a villain out of me. But maybe you haven't noticed that I have a life too. Maybe I deserve to live my life the way I want to." "You deserve it," I said, holding back my voice to make it sound calm. "But not at the expense of others, Lily. And certainly not at the expense of Mom and Dad." Her smile disappeared, as if someone had turned off the light. "You don't understand what I've been through," she said, almost in a whisper. "You left, leaving me here, alone, with their expectations, with their condemnation." "That's not an excuse," I replied, feeling the weight of her words overwhelm me for a moment. "We all make choices, Lily. I chose to be a support for them. And you chose to be a burden to them." Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly turned away, as if she was afraid that I would see her vulnerability. "I hate you, Patricia," she whispered, but her voice was devoid of anger. He sounded tired, exhausted. "No, you don't," I said, stepping closer. "You just don't know how to be different." She turned around abruptly, before I could finish, and ran out of the room, slamming the door loudly. When I was alone, I felt the air in the living room become heavy, saturated with everything we had just said to each other. Jake entered quietly, as if he was afraid to disturb this fragile silence. "Are you okay?" "What is it?" he asked, gently putting his arm around my shoulders. I shook my head. "I don't know. All that. It just never ends." We went outside to help our parents sort out the aftermath of the party. Dad was picking up empty bottles, Mom was wiping the tables. Their faces were tired, but there was no longer the fear in their eyes that I had seen before. "We'll manage, honey," Mom said, noticing my expression. "This place is finally becoming our home." I nodded, though worry still smoldered in my chest. Maybe she was right, and things were really starting to get better. But deep down, I knew that if Lily decided something, she wouldn't back down so easily. Lily was silent for a long time, her breathing could be heard on the phone. She seemed to be trying to find words that could throw me off balance, but there were none. Finally, her voice sounded low, almost hissing. "Do you really want to do this, Patricia? To destroy our family for the sake of some stupid principle?" I gripped the phone tighter, feeling my anger flare up again. "Lily," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. The family was not destroyed by me. It's your behavior, your greed and irresponsibility that has brought us to this point." There was silence on the other end of the line, but I could feel her rage literally pulsing through the connection. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" Her voice trembled with suppressed emotion. "You've always been a favorite, you've always considered yourself superior to me. But you know what? Good luck with your judges and lawyers. I'll be back, Patricia. And you'll regret going against your own sister." The line went dead, leaving me standing in silence, with a heavy phone in my hand. Jake, who was sitting next to me, watching me closely, reached out and carefully took the phone. "Are you okay?" "What is it?" he asked, and there was more concern in his voice than usual. "I do not know," I answered honestly, feeling everything turn over inside. "Maybe I made a mistake." "No, you did the right thing," he said softly, putting his hand on my shoulder. "Sometimes the truth is painful, but it is necessary." The following weeks were indeed stormy. Lily and her husband tried to justify themselves, saying that the debacle at the villa was just an unfortunate misunderstanding caused by excessive alcohol consumption. But the CCTV footage spoke for itself. Their actions were deliberate, and the damage caused was enormous. The trials began quickly. Lily behaved defiantly, not hiding her contempt for the fact that her younger sister decided to flaunt her in front of the law. However, the further things went, the more her confidence was replaced by anxiety. One day, when Jake and I were preparing for the next meeting, my mother came to my office. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were burning with determination. "Patricia," she said, sitting down across from me, "I know how hard this is for you. And I want you to know, you're doing everything right." "Mom, I just want you and Dad to be able to live in peace," I said, looking down at the table. I didn't expect it to go this far. She took my hand and squeezed it, as she did when she was a child, when she wanted to calm me down. Sometimes, to clean a wound, you need to endure pain. And that's exactly what you're doing. At the next hearing, the court ruled in my favor. Lily and her husband were obliged to compensate for the damage caused to the villa, and received a warning about possible criminal consequences in case of a repeat of such actions. Their lawyer applied for a retrial, but I knew they had little chance of success. I haven't seen Lily in months after the trial. She seems to have decided to completely distance herself from her family. Mom and Dad were slowly recovering from all the upheavals, and the villa finally became the place of peace it was supposed to be. One evening, sitting on the terrace with a cup of tea, I watched the sunset reflected in the calm surface of the lake. Jake came out to me and sat down next to me. "You did everything you could, Patricia," he said, hugging me. "I know," I replied, leaning against his shoulder. "But sometimes it seems to me that I have lost not only my sister, but also a part of myself." "Maybe," he said softly, "but you've gained what you've always wanted, peace and freedom for your parents. And it's worth a lot." I nodded silently, watching the sun slowly disappear over the horizon. Everything has really changed. And despite the pain I had to go through, I felt it was necessary to finally break the cycle of chaos that had held us all captive for so many years. I was sitting in my living room, sorting through the papers that related to the renovation of the villa. Every act of vandalism has been thoroughly documented, from painted walls to broken chairs and broken lamps. All the damage, including cleaning and restoration, cost more than $10,000. My lawyer, Mr. Whitman, strongly recommended that I file a claim for the entire amount. I doubted for a long time, because it meant continuing the confrontation with Lily, which had already exhausted me emotionally. But in the end, I decided that justice was more important. The atmosphere at the trial was tense. Lily and her husband were sitting on the opposite side of the room, avoiding eye contact with me. She looked more tired than usual, but there was still a challenge in her posture. The judge, after listening carefully to both sides, examined the evidence presented, including CCTV footage. His decision was clear and unambiguous, in favor of the plaintiff. The judge ruled that Lily and her husband must pay the full amount of damages, and also imposed a suspended sentence on them for trespassing and intentional damage to property. The consequences of this verdict have been devastating for their family. Lily's husband, who used to rely on his charm and connections, suddenly faced reality. A criminal record became an obstacle to new career opportunities. Lily, who had never worked, was forced to go to work. According to rumors, she got a job as a waitress at a local diner, returning home late at night exhausted. I've heard that she and her husband are fighting more and more often, teetering on the brink of divorce. For me, the court's decision became the starting point for an important step. I sent an official notice forbidding Lily from approaching the villa and stopped all contact with her. It was a painful decision, but necessary. I had to choose between peace for my family and the constant chaos that accompanied Lily. Mom and Dad finally moved into the villa full-time. Every time I came for monthly visits, I noticed a change in them. They looked happier, calmer, younger. "We should have done this a long time ago," Dad once told me, smiling. "We love spending time with our grandchildren, but now it's only a few hours, and then we return to our peaceful lives." They left their old house to Lily, but made it clear that this was their last act of kindness. The financial assistance ended there. Now Lily had to finally get back on her feet on her own. My own life was gradually getting better. The work was going great, and the relationship with Jake was getting stronger. And then one evening, when we were having dinner together, I gathered my courage and shared the news that changed our lives. "Jake, I'm pregnant," I said, feeling my voice tremble. His reaction was instantaneous. His face lit up with joy. His eyes sparkled like a child who saw a Christmas tree. He picked me up in his arms and spun me around, laughing and crying at the same time. Now that I'm writing this, I'm 6 months old. We're going to have a girl. Jake and I are completely immersed in preparing for her appearance, choosing colors for the nursery, reading books about parenting and discussing what kind of parents we want to be. Sometimes I think about Lily. The last thing I heard about her was the constant quarrels with her husband, their struggle to save the marriage. Part of me is sad for my sister, for the chaos she has plunged her life into. But most of them feel free from the obligation to be the one who always solves their problems, who sacrifices their own happiness in order to become a peacemaker. Now, for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can build my life the way I want, focusing on my family and the future. This feeling turned out to be sweet, almost unfamiliar, but well-deserved.